Good afternoon and welcome to Politics on BU Station. I'm joined here this afternoon by Dr. Darren Lilleker, researcher and lecturer in political communications, Joshua Freeland, Labour Party member and resident of the London Borough of Newham, and Tom Mludzinski from Ipsos Mori, who produces the very influential Political Monitor, which produces trends in public opinion. My name is Alison Smith. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. Tom, so you produce the Political Monitor, so this looks at trends in public opinion, and one of the things it looks at is people's propensity to vote if there was a general election. Now, on Newsnight last night, Russell Brand encouraged everybody not to vote. It encourages a system of corrupt politicians. Does that strike true to you? Do you think that reflects anything in public opinion that you could see today?
There's certainly some disengagement, particularly among young people in politics, and that's not particularly new trends. In 2010, less than half of 18 to 24-year-olds voted. So there certainly is a disconnect. Young people in particular, aren't getting engaged in politics. There is a discussion to be had about what you define as politics. If you ask people, do you talk about politics? They tend to say no. But if you ask them about particular issues or stories in the news, then they might well say yes. So it's defining politics is an interesting area, and there's the well-known stat about more people are a member of the RSPB than all the parties put together. And there is a certainly changing world in terms of how people, particularly younger people, are engaging in political discourse and sort of getting involved in campaigning. It doesn't seem that main political parties are that avenue for people as much as it used to be.
Josh, do you think Russell Brand had anything to offer that debate? So as Tom's just outlined, perhaps we don't need to be thinking about these things in terms of political parties or politicians anymore, and maybe it's the issues that matter. When you listened to that interview last night, do you think that he's got something to offer? Has he got something valid to say?
I wouldn't say he's got something to offer. I don't think it's something new, to be honest with you. I would say that what he said does sum up a feeling in some areas. We come from the same area in East London, and that is the kind of general attitude towards politics, that no one trusts them and they don't do enough for the young people. And it is rare that anyone who is young in my area gets involved in politics. It is a rare thing. But do I think a revolution is the answer to this? I don't, in a sense. I think he done a good job in getting across how passionate he was about the subject, but you could have got someone off the street from my area, and I promise you now they would have probably said the same thing. I think he did hit on something where he's very passionate about one subject. That's why I think young people are moving away from political parties. I think instead of having a broad range of issues, they're concentrating on one big one. So it might be the environment, student loans. You know, we saw that during the riots, that young people care about a certain subject and they're very passionate about it, and they'll do what they can to really express it. And I don't think political parties can offer that anymore.
From what Russell Brand was saying last night, he was addressing a really big, overarching issue, quite the opposite of what you've just said, these little things that actually matter. So he may be actually taking some of the wind out of the sails of the people that want to concentrate on these small matters.
Yeah, I don't know, he kind of babbled on a bit if you look at the interview again. He didn't really, one second he's the messiah, the next he's a revolutionist and he's going to change the world. And I didn't like the fact he told people not to vote, because we struggle with young people voting as it is, and I don't think, I don't understand people who go, I want change, and then go, well, there's no point of voting. Well, to a sense that is true, but then if everyone thought like that, then nothing would actually change, you know? It's like, if you want something to happen, you've got to do something about it, and until that does happen, then I can't really see anything change. In our area, no one votes in our area. I didn't vote. I'm not going to lie, I didn't vote. I didn't want to vote for the Labour Party at the time, because I didn't believe in what it stood for, and I couldn't be asked to go down to the street and put a non-valid vote. I just didn't see the point of it. So until something actually happens and a group of people get together and go, well, we're going to do this, then nothing will actually change.
And Darren, what do you think? Was that a media moment last night of no consequence, or is it reflecting a trend that we may see more of?
Well, for Russell Brand, most things are a media moment, and I think it was Jeremy Paxman trying not to agree with Russell Brand too much. It was all a little bit controversial, but at the heart of what he was saying was some real truths, that political parties are very easy to condemn people who are on benefits, write them off as scroungers. These are the people in a way that Russell Brand was talking to, people with whom he's very, very popular. But politics needs to engage with people around their real lives, be relevant to people, and that's true of what Russell Brand was saying. And I can understand someone like him not voting, or even people from his background not voting, because who's asking them to vote? Who's actually going out and seeking their votes? So there is a truth in it. Perhaps the way he did it is a way that will actually engage people more, because he's not a politician. He is, he can say what he likes. He can call Jeremy darling.
That was quite a lovely moment.
It was one of the, it was one of the funnier moments of it. You know, he did babble on a bit. It was repeating the same line, but there is a passion there, and a passion about politics engaging people's with people's lives, and that was I think the real message he was getting across. If he got it across well.
The passion was really evident in that short, I think it was a 10-minute interview. It was very evident, probably very easily accessible little talk. He's guest editing The Spectator at the moment, and the New Statesman at the moment. And the larger article that went in there was some sort of 4,500 words, a very flowery, not to the point discussion. That's not something that people are going to be able to access at all. Whether that was just for a New Statesman audience or not, I don't know. Whether we'll see more of this in the papers tomorrow. Do you think there's going to be legs on what Russell Brand's doing here?
I think he's had his moment, to be honest. The problem is that he's talking about people not voting. He's talking about a revolution. Neither are really going to happen. You know, Britain's never had a revolution. People aren't going to take to the streets, and they may not take to the streets and not vote. But that's been happening in elections over the years anyway. Voting sort of declined, gone up a little bit, but it's still lower than it should be. But it needs someone to put a real sense of reality to it. It's fine saying things need to change, but to what and how? You know, it's easy to say, we'll go and change things. Obama did that, but he hasn't changed things, and so people don't believe him as much. Same would be with Russell Brand. You know, change to what? And I think some of Paxman's questions were very good about that. What are you going to do? What do you actually want?
Do you find the same there, Tom, that what people are actually looking for is something very tangible that they can grab onto, actual things the government are producing?
Yeah, exactly, which is why perhaps people are looking for, as you were saying earlier, particular issues and causes that they're interested in. And if Russell Brand did inspire anyone with his interview and they got excited about the revolution or something, then the next question is, what do I do? Well, you don't vote. According to Russell Brand, what do I do? What issues do I get involved in? There weren't many solutions or how to go about producing this revolution that he was calling for, and I think that's what people want to see, is where to go to show that if they are annoyed with the system, if they do feel disconnected, but how do you show that? And I don't think there is. I think that's a difficulty for them in expressing that. Perhaps not voting is one way of doing that, but it's also a way that can then be easily ignored. If you're not voting, then you're very easily ignored. Politicians aren't going to try and appeal to you because you're not voting, so they're not going to try and have policies that are trying to attract you, because what's the point?
I suppose also if Russell Brand had put together a package of things that he believed in, arose by any other name, he is in essence then a political party in his own right. He's nothing different from all the rest.
Sure, and how much this is his sort of thing at the moment for this week. This is what he's interested in talking about, and it is interesting, and it's caused the debate. We're talking about it here, and he was on Newsnight, and it's an interesting point. Some of the stuff that he's raised are very valid about a disconnection. If it starts a debate, then that's all very well and good, and maybe that's the role that he plays, is to spark a debate, but not necessarily see it through. He is, at the end of the day, he's a comedian, he's an actor, he's not a politician. I don't know how seriously he wants to take it in the long run, whether he's going to keep sort of talking about these issues.
That's a difficulty, isn't it, Josh? I mean, you can spark these debates and we can call things politics with a very small p, but quite quickly it tips over into something that you would actually easily recognise as politics. If he takes this any further, he then is potentially a politician.
Yeah, I don't understand the big hoo-ha about it, because it is just Russell Brand, and all he did was come out and say a few things a few working class people might talk about every day, and it's just because it was Russell Brand, just because it was on Newsnight, everyone was talking about it, and it's because of social media now as well that it spread and it gained pace.
A lovely tweet from Owen Jones supporting, Russell Brand, by the way, is going under the Twitter name of Rusty Rockets.
Yeah.
So Owen Jones said he resonates because he beautifully captures a massive growing resentment at the establishment who have had their time. That's quite a statement.
Yeah, he does in a way. Like me, watching it last night, I was following you, and you didn't seem too happy about it, and I was like, oh, how can you not love this? This man, he speaks for the people, he speaks for us, and he speaks for the working class. He's our saviour, the Messiah has returned. And after watching it again, I was a bit, and sort of talking to you earlier, you kind of convinced me in the sense that he had a lot to say, but he didn't listen. And I think that's a big thing with politicians today, that they seem to talk a lot, but never listen. And one thing he maybe could learn from all this ranting and raving and all I hate politics and that is maybe just sit down and listen. And if someone said to him, well, look, this is my view, and if he took it on board, and maybe it would change his opinion. I think he's got a lot of good things to say, and I think he says he's very passionate, especially with his drugs abuse. I love what he has to do with that, and I think he speaks from experience, which a lot of people don't do again. But I don't think sitting on TV and pretending to be this rebel that suddenly just appeared out of nowhere on Newsnight is going to answer anything.
One of the reasons, Tom, that perhaps the political parties aren't getting the support, the mass membership that they used to do, is because the cleavages that group people together have sort of disintegrated over time. He seems to be reviving the idea of the working class. So in your work, how do you sort of perceive like the different segments of population? People wouldn't necessarily identify themselves as working class or underclass anymore. Do you see anything he's trying to do there?
Yeah, I think clearly in some recent politics as well, when you've seen Labour also trying the line of, posh Tories and Tory toffs and things like that, and that had mixed results, I think. There is an interesting piece of work that we're doing at Ipsos Mori is about the generational divide, and particularly Generation Y, and how the youngest generation is becoming much more individualistic and actually turning towards the Conservatives more than previously thought. And it's this idea that less community, and there is maybe less of an identity, and people are more individualistic. They're on their own and looking out for their own issues, but looking after themselves as well. And I guess in times of austerity, that's also an issue, is that you've got to try and fight for yourself. And young people are finding it much more difficult to get jobs when they graduate. Trying to enter the labour market is really difficult. So, the class divide is maybe one thing. Though I think it's far less natural than it used to be.
Yeah, Darren, how would you come back on that? Do you think that there's anything there that is he trying to sort of bring together a class of people that has perhaps fallen out? I mean, he was slightly to the left of Ralph Miliband, I think, in what he was saying. He was a very sort of strong Marxist view of how society should be structured. That doesn't chime with the individualistic nature, as Tom's pointed out, of our society today.
I'm not sure if you recognise as a Marxist, but I don't think it was really appealing to a working class, because the working class is something that, as an identity, doesn't exist anymore. But there are lots of different groups, particularly economic groups, people who are struggling, people who are working on minimum wage, low incomes, people who can't find permanent work, people who can't find work at all, who are probably feeling marginalised by all the parties. They don't feel represented by the Conservatives, definitely. But perhaps also don't see much in what Ed Miliband is saying that appeals to them. It's the language, the squeezed middle, the struggling workers, the aspirant workers. These are the people they're appealing to because they have a higher propensity to vote. And so that's who the parties tend to focus on. So those people are the people that Russell Brand, in a way, was speaking about and speaking for. But telling them not to vote perhaps isn't the answer, because if they did vote in numbers and they did start to articulate a political voice, someone would then be listening to them, because they could have a real impact in elections. So could young people. It's just that they look at what's being offered and don't see it as very appealing. But if they did go out and they found the independent candidate or whatever, then they'd be noticed. So, I'm not sure it's those sort of easy class cleavages that really exist. It's who isn't being talked to and talked about. I think those are the people that perhaps Russell Brand and lots of other celebrities sometimes talk about. It's kind of that sort of liberal, egalitarian sort of way of saying, let's talk to everybody. Let's talk about those people that nobody else is talking to.
Josh, you were saying in your area, in your London borough of Newham, you've got a safe Labour seat. If masses of people don't turn out and vote, or if they do, it's not going to make the blindest bit of difference in your area.
It doesn't, and I think that's something else that's wrong with our politics in Britain. These safe constituencies, politics doesn't mean much there, because I don't know if democracy really exists, because even if people do not vote, they're still going to be there at the end of the day, and until someone comes along and goes, well, I can offer an alternative here, and it's an actual true alternative, then what does that actually change? And I would agree to an extent with you. I think there is such thing as a working class. I think it's divided apart now. I think there's an even section below the working class now, where people, as you say, can't even get jobs, let alone sustain and be on the living wage. So, and I think if you look at young people as it is, I think after the last general election, after the whole Liberal Democrats, the tuition fees, I think that done a real big dent into the trust with young people and politicians. And I don't see how you can expect young people to want to care about politics when the only issue that mattered to them got thrown back in their face.
Yeah.
And when they did protest, they were kettled and treated like animals. And then people want to expect them to go and vote and be involved in politics. And it's people like Russell Brand they're going to turn to, that extremist view, that angry view, because that's how they feel.
We're going to have to leave it on that note, I'm afraid. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming in. It's been a pleasure having you. Thank you very much indeed.